Good morning and welcome to Morocco. My name is Abdo and I'm traveling around this gorgeous country with a set of newly found friends because we've joined on to an intrepid tour. This morning we've woken up at this beautiful hotel here in Chefchaouen. There are 6 of us who are going to be getting into a private taxi and heading about 40 minutes north of here to a hiking trail. It was an incredibly interesting drive through the mountains this morning. As we were eating breakfast, the sun came up and we spotted that there was a cloud inversion. But for the vast majority of the journey, we've just been driving through fog. I'm pleased that this trail is going to take us to a waterfall and not some epic viewpoint, because I think if it was going to be an epic viewpoint, there was a potential that we would just look out into nothing but fog. But as we've pulled up to the trailhead, all of the fog in this part of the valley has dispersed. It's a lot more touristy than what I was expecting it to be, but I think because we've come very early on, it's still very quiet. So hopefully, we'll have some peace and quiet on the trail. So, if I were to drop you here, and didn't tell you which country you were in, what country would you hazard a guess as this being? I would think I was in the US. It's the wrong direction. We go back to the confluence and then head up the gorge. The hiking trail is 5.5 kilometers out, and then naturally, because we're hiking up a canyon, it's going to be another 5.5 kilometers back. I get the impression though that it's probably not overly strenuous because, well, the amount of cafes there are towards the trailhead says to me that this is a very touristy hiking trail. If you're planning on coming to this area, and you're, by any chance, watching this video, because you too would like to come out to these waterfalls, for a little bit of context, we, through our intrepid guide who did this with our hotel reception, they booked us the taxi. We've paid 400 dirhams for the transport. The taxi driver has dropped us off, but he has actually left, which we weren't expecting. We just told him to come back at 2 o'clock and we will pay him when we get back to Chefchaouen. As well as having plenty of places to be able to stop for lunch, snacks, or be able to pick up drinks, it also seems to be incredibly well serviced. It makes it a very dignified place because there's plenty of toilets too. The standard rate seems to be 2 dirhams to use those toilets. After getting to forks on the trail, we've needed to choose where to go, and we've got to this cafe where I thought, oh, it's really helpful they've put all of these blue arrows showing us exactly where the trail goes. Turns out those blue arrows are just pointing us in the direction of the restaurant. And in fact, you have to ignore those and follow the path in the opposite direction. I think we've gotten a little bit lucky at this time of the day, because no staff were there, but I can see how clever it is. You walk onto their property, and then they start saying, oh please, sit down, have a drink, have some food, and it just becomes that little bit tricky. Whereas obviously if you skirt past the restaurant, it's a little bit easier to avoid them. So we've drawn the conclusion that these huge concrete stepping stones that allow us to get over the river were probably just made out here. No doubt they'll have put the dry, powdery concrete mixture onto mules or donkeys. And then, since there's plenty of water coming from the river, they'll have just used that to make them. Because honestly, I cannot see how on earth anyone could be bothered to lug all of these out this way. Into nature we go, this way it is. I'd say the trail past all of those cafes and restaurants is much better maintained, and then it takes like a bit of a corner. When it does, all of those cafes and restaurants have completely disappeared, and I would also say that the hiking trail is in much worse condition. There's lots of paving blocks to get across the river that's missing, so you're having to do a bit more scrambling over rocks, honestly. Up on the cliff face, we heard this immense noise. It definitely sounded like wildlife, and I just assumed it must have been some kind of bird of prey. We all looked up, and there was a whole load of monkeys. A couple of them were up in a tree, so those guys were the easiest ones to spot. But there were more clambering around the cliff face, and I've got a feeling that the noise we heard was them probably notifying their family or friends saying, hey, there's humans. They were all sitting there, watching us very carefully. And likewise, we were watching them very carefully, though I think for very different reasons. But luckily, there was quite a distance between the two of us, because we have heard that monkeys can be quite aggressive. I'm guessing, like most wildlife, if they feel threatened, that's when they're more likely to become aggressive. So, no one, thankfully, decided to go clambering up the cliff face to get closer photographs. Without a shadow of a doubt, the more challenging this trail is becoming, the more rewarding it's becoming. We haven't seen any of those cafes with brightly colored plastic tables and chairs for quite some time now. Instead, all of that has switched over into stunning landscapes. Really amazing wildlife. So, they mentioned the monkeys a little bit earlier on, but we've also seen things like butterflies, dragonflies, and lizards. If you're planning on coming out here, and you're wondering whether to keep on going past all the cafes and restaurants, 100% you should. So, we decided to put a little bit of pep in our step because, well, the Times driver isn't just waiting for us, he's coming back at 2 o'clock, and time is, fast running away from us. But, you know, our understanding is that there's supposed to be this epic waterfall at the end of this trail. And honestly, I'd really love to see it. Looks like Devin took quite a liking to the donkey. And, funny enough, the donkey seems to have taken quite a liking to him too, because now it's just following us along the hiking trail. We just passed a very kind couple who said 12 minutes. I think that's what they said. We've just been booking it so much that my brain's all over the place. And I was like, mercy. And then I thought, wait, no, douce, that's not French. There seems to be a lot of smoke in these woods and, I had wondered if maybe that was people who've set up barbecues and usually they would be at the end of the trail. I really hope this is worth it. Well, this is it. This is the waterfall at the end. I kept on saying, John, like I really hope it's gonna be worth it. And the thing is, to be honest with you, to come in this spring this would probably be pretty spectacular, but in the autumn, after a very dry summer, it's a little bit more of a trickle. It is pretty, but I think really the hike out here has been what's been the most rewarding part of it, and perhaps some of those smaller waterfalls a little bit further down are, slightly better. So, if you're watching this video because you're thinking about coming and doing these waterfalls, and you're also planning on coming in autumn, well, we actually bumped into another couple who sort of started around the same time as us. They started heading back ages ago, and we were curious like, wait, you haven't been to the end already, have you? And they said no, they'd only gone as far as the smaller waterfalls, and were turning back because there's actually another canyon you can do from the trailhead. That one takes you to a bridge, or an archway, that's right up in the canyon wall. So, honestly, that could be a nice alternative to try, instead of coming up to this slightly disappointing waterfall. While the waterfall might have been a little bit on the disappointing side compared to some of the photos I've seen online, you really can't take away from the fact that it's still pretty spectacular with all of the greenery around. We've been to Morocco before, back in 2017, and on that last trip we headed south, so it was very desert-like. But here, it's just a totally different vibe. All of our pictures back then were just orange, unless we came across things like the Zelidé or their mosaics. Honestly, walking through this canyon, you wouldn't even know it was Morocco. If someone had just dropped me here, I'd probably assume we were in one of the US national parks, like Yosemite or Zion or somewhere like that. So, yeah, I've got to give it credit. It's absolutely gorgeous, and just a really different side to Morocco that I hadn't seen until today. Just because of the amount of time we've got left, we're just going to stop for a quick snack, even though you could totally get full-on meals like tagines at so many of the cafes and restaurants around here. One thing I've definitely noticed is the lack of litter on this trail, and as we've gone up, I've seen a few bins, like there's one just here by the waterfall. So, when I finish off my banana, I don't even need to do the whole packing it out thing. I can just toss it straight into one of the little bins, and it's obviously collected by someone, which is really helpful,